imagination simply contained in the mind? Or does it tap into an unseen world with messages waiting to be told? There is a place where legends cross over into our world, where strange visions and whispers beckon, and superstition takes hold. Step into the Black Cat's shadow.
Welcome back to the Black Cat Shadow. Join us as we take a closer look at the cases of the strange and unexplained from all over the world and how they inspire some of our favorite horror movies. My name's Andy, and I'm one of your hosts, podcasting from Kansas City, Missouri.
And I'm Dakota. I'm coming out of Olathe, Kansas. Today, we are going to talk about the great state of Utah. It was a challenging state for us to research. Not a lot of scary stuff going on. I know that we mentioned that some of these states are interesting and some aren't. I think it's interesting. I don't know about you. What do you think, Andy?
Yeah, I mean, once you kind of start looking and stuff, there's some really creepy stuff that goes on in Utah. I actually found a few different urban legends that were pretty creepy. Some weird things that was just interesting to dig into and to do some research on. So yeah, it was fun. Even though I may not have expected a lot from Utah, I actually got some pretty cool stuff out of it.
Yeah, and I found a lot of decent history. I was just digging until I found a website called The Dead History. It's an actual website ran by this lady. She's a history buff. That's all she does. She just goes into the history of these different states and all these awesome facts. And Utah definitely has a lot of weird history. And a lot of haunted history too, if you wanna go there.
Yeah, I think I actually ran across that website too on my research. Yeah, it's pretty cool. I mean, I guess she heads up a paranormal investigation team too, and but they go at it from more of the historical perspective. So yeah, it was interesting reading her articles on each ghost story or urban legend that's popular in Utah.
Yeah, and Utah has a lot of history. We talk about how horror movies are inspired by history and real events and true crime, and that's what this podcast is all about. And I kind of want to take a minute to go over some of this haunted history of Utah. What do you think?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, my first real thing is talking about the ghostly Volkswagen of Viewmont High School. Do you know anything about Viewmont High School in Utah?
No.
And you know who Ted Bundy was, right?
Oh, yeah. Did he commit some of his murders in Utah? I can't remember.
I believe so. But they actually found his Volkswagen in Utah in this high school parking lot. The legend goes that the ghostly Volkswagen Bug that belonged to serial killer Ted Bundy is said to be seen in the school parking lot of Viewmont High School, only to vanish into thin air. The history. On the evening of November 8th, 1974, serial killer Ted Bundy made his way to Viewmont High in Bountiful, Utah, after an unsuccessful kidnapping attempt at Fashion Place Mall in Salt Lake City. What led him that night to Viewmont High is unknown. He was living in downtown Salt Lake City at the time while attending law school at the University of Utah. 17-year-old high school senior Deborah Kent was at the school watching a play with her parents. The play was running late, and she offered to go pick up her 10-year-old brother from the Rustic Rink, which was about 10 minutes away, so that her parents could finish watching the play. And Rustic Rink is a real place. It's actually, I don't think it's in operation anymore. It was just a roller skating rink, and if you know anything about the 60s and 70s, they were starting to go out of style, but they were still pretty popular.
Yeah, I mean, they were even popular, like in the 80s when I was a kid. We'd have skating parties and stuff we'd have school skating parties with, so like all the kids at our elementary school would go, skating. Pretty fun.
Yeah, and I used to do them too. We still go to some of the skating rinks around here. There's not very many of them, but there are a few.
Yeah, I didn't think so. I mean, I don't even know where any of them are at anymore.
There's some in my area. There's Skate City here, and then there's down towards Ottawa, Kansas. I know some of our Kansas listeners they'll know that one. There's actually a small skating rink down there. So
Okay.
and to make a long story short about this, while Deborah was looking for her brother, I guess she ran into Ted Bundy, and she disappeared, and she never returned. But something that kind of led the police to Ted Bundy himself was a handcuff key that was left in the parking lot next to her purse and her car keys.
Huh. Yep. That would be some pretty convincing evidence there.
Yeah, it goes on, and obviously Ted Bundy was caught, and he actually confessed to her abduction and the murder, and he was actually executed by electric chair January 24th, 1989 at Florida State Prison. He actually gave an actual location to where they could find Deborah Kent's body, and all they found was a patella, and that was pretty much it. And they still can't even confirm that it belonged to Deborah Kent.
Oh, okay. Yeah, who knows? I mean, I don't think they really even know how many people he actually murdered.
Yeah, there's some speculation that he murdered more than 6 or 7 people.
I guess the scary thing about him is, like, if you met him on the street, you probably wouldn't even think he's a serial killer, because he was very charismatic, and I mean, I think the ladies liked him. He was good looking, and
yeah, and most serial killers have something about them that make them alluring to people, and it's anybody, not just like the serial killer junkies, the women that get off on the idea of being with a serial killer, I guess.
I think that's what gives them the edge, and what helps them kill people is because people let their guard down around a charismatic person.
Exactly. And most of these stories kind of take place around Salt Lake City. If you know anything about Salt Lake City, it was an immigrant city. It was mainly built out of immigrants from everywhere, like Ireland, Australia, France, everywhere.
Now, were they largely Mormons?
There's a lot of different people immigrating. Like a lot of what's based around Salt Lake City now are Mormons. Let's see here. This kind of leads me to the next story here, which is the legend of Jean Baptiste, the grave robber of Salt Lake City. For the people in Salt Lake City, you'll know exactly who this is. You guys study this guy, I'm sure, just because he was so infamous. The legend goes, Jean Baptiste's ghost is said to walk the southern shore of the Great Salt Lake, which is supposedly where he died officially. So the story of Jean Baptiste is one of the most interesting or intriguing Utah legends, mainly because of its gruesome topic. There's very little known historically about Baptiste. The 1860 census lists him as being born in 1813 in Ireland. However, people who knew him in Australia said he could not speak English very well and had come from Venice, Italy. Some of those who knew him in Salt Lake thought he was a Frenchman. What we know is that he was in Castlemaine, Australia until 1855, when he immigrated to the U.S. on board the LDS immigration ship Turkina, I believe is how it's pronounced. The Turkina departed Melbourne on the 27th of April, 1855, and arrived in Honolulu on July 5th, 1855. Baptiste made his way to San Francisco in February 1856 and stayed in California for a few years. By 1859, Jean Baptiste was living in Salt Lake City, having built a small house near the city cemetery and married a woman by the name of Dorothy Jensen. It's also said that he was the choir leader for the ward. This poor woman was not married to him for long before he was accused of grave robbing. On the 16th of January, 1862, 2 men accused of beating the governor, John Dawson, were shot and killed by Salt Lake City police. No one came forward to give Maroney a proper burial. I'm guessing Maroney was one of the men. So the police officer by the name of Henry Heath paid for his burial, including purchasing a suit for the man to be buried in. Jean Baptiste's disturbing secret would have been kept a little longer by Maroney Clausen's family, not eventually claim his body and ask that it be exhumed and moved to their family plot in Draper, Utah. Upon exhumation and opening his casket, they found that not only was Maroney Clausen buried face down, his body was also completely naked. So that's kind of where it started. That's where Jean-Baptiste was starting to get caught, I guess you would say. But story goes on, blah, blah, blah. Eventually, Officer Heath catches up with Baptiste, and he starts to question him after they caught him. And they take him to the cemetery, and it kind of goes like this. Henry Heath, his daughter had died, and she was buried in the cemetery where they took him. And he had asked him about all the places that he was digging graves, and he was looking for things, obviously. And he kept going. He said, I've robbed every single one of these in this little area. Heath points to his own daughter's grave, and he says, did you rob that one? He goes, no, I didn't. And afterwards, Heath actually admitted that if he would have said he dug up his daughter's grave, he would have killed him on the spot.
Yeah. Yeah, there's something about, the whole grave desecration thing. It's very disgusting, act, just digging up somebody's body and either taking stuff from it or just doing whatever with it. It's just a very disgusting thing, and it's very disrespectful to the person, that's buried there. You're disturbing their gravesite, and it's interesting. There was actually a X-Files episode, a couple of them that revolved around a death fetishist and somebody that collects dead people's body parts or hair or fingernails from a dead body. And so this guy would actually dig up the graves to collect his souvenirs, so to speak. So yeah, it's a very creepy and disgusting. So yeah, I mean, I could see some, definitely a parent wanting to kill this guy that, may have dug up their child.
Yeah, it's a really touchy subject. And Jean-Baptiste was so infamous for this. He actually kept everything, and mainly what he took was clothes. I don't think he was really looking for anything. I think it was just to, I guess, get his kicks. I don't know. So here's something that makes this a creepy story. Obviously, this is in the mid to late 1800s, so there's not a lot that they could do for punishing him other than throw him in jail. Well, apparently the courts deemed him not dangerous enough to kill and not worth the time of jailing for life, so they banished him. They banished him to an island in the Great Salt Lake. And literally, this island is big enough for him and a shack and whatever else. So in the spring of 1862, Jean-Baptiste was taken by wagon to the larger Antelope Island, and then by boat to Fremont Island. At the time, the island was used by the Miller family to graze their cattle, and there was a small shack stocked with basic provisions. The Miller brothers would usually go out to the island every few weeks to check their herd. 3 weeks after leaving Baptiste on the island, the brothers told authorities that they'd been out to the island, and while they did not directly interact with Baptiste, they saw him on the island and know that he had helped himself to most of their food in their shack. 6 weeks after Baptiste's banishment, the brothers returned to the island to find that Jean-Baptiste was nowhere to be found. The shack had been partially dismantled, and the carcasses of a 2-year-old heifer was laying nearby with part of the hide cut into strips. They reasoned that he used the leather from the heifer and the pieces of wood from the shack to make a crude raft and make his way to the mainland. There's no verifiable documentation of Baptiste from this point on.
Oh wow! So he may have got back into the general society. Then that's creepy.
And something that kind of that makes it kind of creepy too about it was in 1890, a group of hunters found this human skull near the mouth of the Jordan River, which is in the south end of Salt Lake, nowhere near Fremont Island. In 1893, a partial skeleton was found missing its head, with a ball and chain around its leg. Immediately, newspapers declared that Jean-Baptiste has been found at last, and this is most likely what started the rumors of sightings of Baptiste's ghost.
Yeah, so I guess they did find him after all, or they think they did.
Yeah, they think they did. Other than that, I believe that he might have actually died. He might have thrown himself into the water and drowned himself. Because if you know anything about a ball and chain, they're kind of heavy.
Yeah, I don't know. I've never worn one.
I don't know. I mean, I honestly think he threw himself into the river, into Salt Lake and drowned. I
Yeah.
just have a feeling that's what he did.
I mean, it sounds like there was probably some mental illness going on there. So yeah, it wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me either.
I've got a few urban legends that I wanted to talk about that I was reading about for Utah. This one's also takes place in Salt Lake City, and so the legend, it's the legend of Emo's grave, and I guess it's a pretty popular one there in Salt Lake City. It's kind of like a ghost story, but the legend says that if you go to the Salt Lake City Cemetery and you go to the Moritz, it's Moritz family mausoleum, and you walk around the small building, like if you walk around the mausoleum 3 times saying Emo each time, and then you go back around to the front of it and look into the small opening there in the door, you might just see 2 glowing red eyes staring back at you. So the eyes are supposed to belong to someone named Emo, but there wasn't really anyone with that name buried there, and the grave belongs to the Moritz family, and it was where Jacob Moritz was buried. So they don't really know where the name Emo came from, but that would be a pretty creepy thing. As a kid, you have the urban legend of like Bloody Mary, or you go to the bathroom and you turn around and say Bloody Mary 5 times or something, and then she's supposed to show up in the mirror. And I know I never had the guts to actually do that. I mean, now I could probably do it and not really worry about seeing the red eyes, but that'd be pretty freaky if I did see him, that's for sure. Dakota, did you ever try to say Bloody Mary and see if she would show up?
No. I really haven't had the balls to do it, I guess. I just don't think I want to.
Yeah, I mean, there's a good chance that nothing would happen, but you just never know. It's like, I don't know, I've seen enough scary movies to know, what could happen, but and I think actually in one of the Paranormal Activity movies, didn't they do that? I think. Yeah,
I think it was the third one.
Yeah, I think it was the third one. The 2 little girls standing in the bathroom, and I think they said Bloody Mary. Well, actually, that kind of reminds me of the Candyman movie, because in Candyman, you say Candyman a certain amount of times, and then he shows up in the mirror. It's kind of interesting how all these different things, like you say the name and then like the ghost will show up in a mirror or something like that. It's always kind of interesting how they revolve around mirrors and saying the name of somebody a certain amount of times. There's always that common link there. So you can see how some of these urban legends are kind of created, and the basic structure is kept for each like city or state, but the name's changed or the location has changed, so like that. So it's kind of interesting to see those common ties to those stories. But actually changing to something more physical, or supposedly, there's folklore about a creature that's living in Bear Lake on the Utah-Idaho border. It's described as a serpent with legs about 18 inches long, where it can actually walk up onto the shore. It's reported to be 50 feet long with a head like a cow, otter, crocodile, or walrus. It could look like any one of those creatures. The legend actually got its start from articles written by Joseph C. Rich, who was a Mormon that collected secondhand stories from people who encountered the creature. He did later say that the stories were fiction, that he just made them all up, but that actually didn't stop people from seeing something strange in the lake. In 1907, the monster supposedly killed a horse at a campsite, and there have been a wide range of witnesses, from a small child to a Boy Scout leader to a local businessman, and it has now become local folklore and a tourist attraction. The Bear Lake Monster boat, it's a boat made to look like a Green Lake monster that gives 45-minute scenic tours of the lake, accompanied by the retelling of the legend. The monster has gained some media exposure as well. It was the subject of a Lost Tapes episode on Animal Planet. It's a pretty cool TV show. Like, each episode would be a different creature or something, and it would kind of be like a found footage type thing. people would run into these different monsters, like the Jersey Devil. The Bear Lake Monster was one of them. And it was also the subject of an investigation on Sci-Fi Channel's Haunted Highway Season 1, Episode 1, called The Bear Lake Beast. So even though it was the guy that originally said that he had just made up those stories, it's interesting that there are people who are still saying that they see the creature there, even though it was supposed to be just made up. And there's a state park that has a curse attached to it there. It's the Escalante State Park, and it's just north of the town of Escalante in Utah. The park features displays of plant and marine fossils, petrified wood, and dinosaur fossils over 150 million years old. The petrified or fossilized wood is red, yellow, white, and black, and it makes a great souvenir for the avid rock collector. That is, except that it is illegal to take anything from the park, and it's also supposedly cursed. The park manager says that they receive chunks of petrified wood in the mail with notes attached, from past visitors apologizing for stealing it. They try to mail it back and apologize, and they say they're trying to get rid of the curse, in their letter. So anytime a visitor to the park takes a chunk of petrified wood, they end up having really bad luck. So one of the letters from the year before said, "I picked up this small piece of wood when I visited last year. I thought the warnings were phony, but since that time I have had 3 accidents. The visitor had a string of bad luck. He had a string of accidents and injuries, including a broken collarbone, 3 broken ribs, and a broken foot. The unlucky tourist also had a fire in their motorhome, and the engine in his car went out right after the warranty expired." They believed it all stemmed from taking the piece of wood from the park. So in the visitor center, there is even a glass exhibit case filled with a collection of letters from people that have stolen pieces of wood and sent them back. So they have that exhibit there just to discourage any future thefts. And I guess actually there's a pile of these pieces of petrified wood. Like when you first enter the state park, there's just a big pile of pieces of petrified wood, because I guess they can't put it back in the park where it was found. So they just have to put it in a big pile outside of the park. So the main thing I wanted to talk about, though, today, the main urban legend or the weird thing that I wanted to talk about for Utah was Skinwalker Ranch. So it's a plot of land that's like 480 acres, and it's southeast of Ballard, Utah. So its name is, one of its names is the Sherman Ranch, because the Sherman family lived there for a short amount of time. But it's better known as the Skinwalker Ranch. The ranch has quite the history of paranormal events and UFO sightings. The name Skinwalker Ranch comes from the Native American legend of the Skinwalker. The Ute tribe says that skinwalkers live in the area around the ranch. Skinwalkers are witches. Basically, they're witches that have chosen to pursue evil, and they are said to have the power to turn into animals like owls, wolves, foxes, and coyotes. The initiation rite for a witch to become a skinwalker is to murder a family member. So most Native Americans are familiar with the legend. It's pretty common throughout the country too, in other states, and most won't even talk about him. The Ute Indians believe the skinwalkers have congregated in the surrounding area of the Skinwalker Ranch because of a Navajo curse put on them. The Sherman family lived at the ranch for 2 years in the 90s and reported many strange things happening there. UFO sightings were the most common thing for them to see. They saw several unexplained aircraft and blinking lights, and they heard voices speaking a strange language. Several of their cattle were also mutilated in unexplained ways. Many believe that cattle mutilations are the result of scientific experiments, but who is actually doing the experiments is another mystery. Because sometimes they think it's UFO related. And there were some unusual creatures seen on the land, including a large wolf that wasn't phased by bullets. So one day the wolf was attacking a calf, and the father, the farmer, he grabbed a .357 Magnum, and he shot the wolf a couple of times, but it didn't really affect. It didn't act like it was affected at all. So the rancher went and got his hunting rifle and shot it again, and this time it let go of the calf and ran away. So the rancher and his son, they followed the tracks for a while, but then They were stumped as the tracks just ended and the wolf was nowhere to be found. One of their horses was attacked by what they described as a hyena on steroids. As Sherman approached it just basically vanished in thin air. And there have been several bizarre drowning incidents at a nearby reservoir that is somehow linked to the Skinwalker Ranch. It's called Bottle Hollow Reservoir, and it was built in 1970 as a kind of a one-of-a-kind resort to support the Ute tribe on that reservation. But with the decline of the oil boom in that region in the late 80s, the Bottle Hollow Resort was shut down. If you ask certain locals or Ute tribesmen, they may tell you that the drownings are caused by giant snakes that they believe live in the lake. A tribal police officer even says he saw one swimming in the water. Other reports say that these creatures are actually giant slugs. And I had mentioned cattle mutilations earlier. Well, some of the reports are really weird to read about. One cow they found didn't have any wounds or bleeding, just a hole bored through its eye. Others were found cut up and had organs or other body parts removed. What makes this really strange is the fact that there's no blood ever found at any of these sites. So so a lot of people that study these cattle mutilations, they believe that they are UFO related, and that the cattle are taken on board, spaceships or these aircraft, and there's experiments done on them there or someplace else, and then the carcasses are drained of blood and just dropped off after the experiments are done, and so that's why they believe there's no blood ever found nearby. But one of the more interesting UFO cases involved these blue orbs that the family kept seeing flying around. And one night they sent their 3 hunting dogs after the orbs, and the orbs they would kind of fly away as soon as one of the dogs approached. And then so the orbs kept leading the dogs farther and farther away, and as soon as they were out of sight, Mr. Sherman heard the dogs yelping, but he was actually too afraid to go after them at night, so he went looking for them in the morning. And what he found was 3 circles of burnt grass with some kind of slimy goo in the middle. So apparently that's all that was left of the dogs. And the Shermans also reported finding some crop circles on their land too. And if all that wasn't enough, there's also been some ghostly activity reported on the land. The mom claimed that often when she came home with groceries, she would unpack them and then later find all the food repacked in the bags. And there is a website called skinwalkerranch.org that records all the different entities encountered on the ranch. There's a lot of information on this website. It's if you're at all interested in this story, I would say go check that out. It's skinwalkerranch.org. There is one entity called the Dark One that kind of caught my attention. Descriptions of it say this apparition looks like an ancient Native American, possibly like an Aztec. Somehow he's trapped in another plane of existence. These sightings are extremely rare, and many researchers believe that he has power over the other entities that appear there. And he may have even been the cause of what some people just speculate to be an interdimensional portal. The portal, it's the main explanation some people have for the abundance of strange beings and creatures seen in the area. It's either seen as an orange or blue light that lasts for about 10 seconds and hovers anywhere from 500 to 1,000 feet in the air. Extra-dimensional beings and UFOs are said to cross over into our world using this portal. One such entity is called the sentient mist. So this mist-like form is believed to be a being that has just crossed over into our reality and hasn't quite attained a solid form yet. Reports say that while in this form, it can extend these tentacle-like arms and use them to feed off anyone unfortunate enough to cross its path. In 1996, the National Institute for Discovery Science, or NIDS, bought the ranch. It's an organization founded by billionaire Robert Bigelow of Bigelow Aerospace. So NIDS performed many investigations into the phenomena happening around the ranch, but NIDS was closed down in 2004. But many believe that contact was made with some otherworldly intelligence, and that the government and Bigelow Aerospace have been working together and are still working in secret. The perimeter around the property is now like a fortress with security patrols, infrared sensors, and cameras keeping any onlookers from seeing whatever's going on there. It's a pretty creepy place, it sounds like. And I've heard other people talking about it in some other podcasts, and there's been some books written on the on the subject, I want to definitely dig more into it and read some of these books. It sounds pretty interesting to me. What do you think about that, Dakota?
I mean, Skinwalker Ranch is supposedly one of the most paranormal hotspots in the United States, just because of all the events that have happened there, and not to mention a reoccurring term that we like to throw around here. You know what term I'm talking about, right?
Let me guess. Is that the ley lines?
Ley lines.
Yeah.
It all comes full circle, everybody. Ley lines. You gotta understand. This is something that, like, it's a science, people. It's a science. I don't know. I'm convinced. I'm convinced now, after seeing so many maps and doing my own research. I've come to the conclusion that ley lines are the reason that are just, I don't know. I'm just so convinced.
There's definitely a correlation between these ley lines and, like, the weird things that we talk about, like these different, like, paranormal hotspots, where, like, there's ley lines crossing or something like that, or where there's, like, a bunch of them that intersect. And it's interesting to hear that the Skinwalker Ranch is directly, like, in the path of these ley lines.
Yeah, and something that's kind of interesting. How you talked about the beast in Bear Lake, right?
Yeah.
Something I kind of find interesting. There's a theory that because of the ley lines, all the negative paranormal energy, that certain myths come to life, like they manifest themselves. I know my Supernatural fans out there will understand. There was an episode of Supernatural where I think it was a cursed object or something, but it was this negative energy that when somebody would, like, it was a wish. It was a wishing well, because of negative energy, and they make the wish, it corrupt their wishes and turn them evil.
Yeah, I think I've seen that episode, and yeah, it's what you call a thought form. It's another name for it is a tulpa, and, like, in some cultures, yeah, they believe that if something is talked about enough, that it can come to life. And I think a good example of that is, like, any urban legend that's talked about, like the Bear Lake Monster. However, if it's a known urban legend, but then people are starting to see it, yeah, that's an interesting explanation for that. It could be like, if there's enough energy put into this thing that people are believing in, that it could actually give it life. Kind of like Slender Man, it definitely started off as like a creepypasta story, but now people are saying that they see Slender Man. So yeah, it's an interesting theory, about the tulpas and the thought forms, and so yeah, it definitely could be an explanation for the Bear Lake Monster if people are in fact actually seeing something there.
Yeah, and I'm completely sold on that idea too. I have a feeling that's what it all comes back down to, I guess.
Yeah, and then that could also be an explanation for different hauntings too. If there's like a ghost story about people seeing a certain thing, and then people go there to that location and they actually see that, yeah, maybe it's just because people have talked about it enough to where it's given this idea enough energy to actually manifest itself to where people can see it.
Yeah, and I guess I'd be completely sold on that idea. If we could actually find definitive proof, then it'd be understandable.
So this discussion on the Skinwalker Ranch, it takes us into the inspiration of horror movies and things like that. So there is a horror movie that was made based on the events of Skinwalker Ranch, and the movie is called Skinwalker Ranch.
Whatever this thing is, I believe it's still here, and it's really smart.
I got motion detectors across most of the property, so if something moves, we're gonna know about it.
This is not a natural death. These incisions, they're perfect.
And so Skinwalker Ranch, it was released in 2013, and I think it was probably a direct-to-video type movie, and it was directed by Devin McGinn and Steve Berg, who are also actors in the movie. They haven't directed anything else, though. The story was thought up by Steve Berg Ken Bretschneider, Devin McGinn, Murphy Michaels, and the writer was Adam Oler. So I think it was just a bunch of these 4 different people that had the idea for the story, or they probably heard about, the Skinwalker Ranch and had the idea for making a movie based on some of the events in the movie. And then I guess Adam Oler kind of wrote a screenplay for it. And the cast, it actually, I was kind of surprised at the cast because it has John Grise in it. Anybody that's seen Napoleon Dynamite, John Grise was Uncle Rico, so everybody will probably know him from that. But he's also a pretty recognizable face. If you see him in this movie, you'll probably be like, oh yeah, I recognize that guy. He's been to some other stuff too. And then it also has Kyle Davis. And I recognize him, and he's from the Friday the 13th remake from, I think it was like 2009 when they did that. And then this also had Michael Horse. He was in Twin Peaks, and he's a Native American, and he was I think he's one of the sheriff deputies in Twin Peaks, and also he was a bad guy. He was one of the bad guys in Passenger 57 with Wesley Snipes. So those are the 2 main things that I remember him from. So I was surprised to see him. He makes a cameo appearance in this movie, but it was cool to see him in it. And then one of the main characters, Devin McGinn, I recognized him from an episode of Bones. So for the most part, most of the actors I didn't recognize from anything else, except for John Grise and Michael Horse. But so basically the synopsis, the plot of this movie, it starts off. So this is a found footage movie, and they kind of give a brief explanation of where they found the footage. And so it starts off showing some footage, some footage of this family that they're celebrating a birthday, the son's birthday. So it's a farmer and his family, and so the son actually disappears without a trace under mysterious circumstances. And so we see the video footage of that disappearance at the beginning of the movie. So after this, story kind of gets to the scientific team, and they go out. They're interested in this disappearance, so they go out to the ranch to investigate the area and see if they can find any answers. So the team is made up of a couple of scientists, an investigative journalist, a veterinarian, and a military veteran that kind of sets up their security and their surveillance system. He sets up motion sensors and cameras around the property to so they can document whatever happens while they're there. So they're planning on staying there for several days to investigate. And so the first night they're there, they're woken up by this really loud noise, and they hear noises on the roof, and they go out and investigate, and they find a large number of dead bats on the roof. And so it just kind of goes from there. The events kind of escalate. It goes on from there, so I won't spoil it. But so this movie, it is loosely based on some of the events that were reported at the ranch, and some of the things that we've talked about do show up in the movie. I definitely like this movie. And Dakota, I know you got to watch some of it. What are your thoughts on this movie, on what you got to watch?
I mean, I do like the actors in it. The actors have a good dynamic, but my entire I just don't like found footage films, I guess. I've never once liked them. The only one I've really kind of got into was Blair Witch Project, and even that was extreme for me. So I'd have to say it's great. The story's great because they really taken a lot of the stories and kind of made them their own, and kind of turned them on ear a little bit, which is what I look for. I look for movies that take, especially like ones that are based off true stories or that are based off of real events, and they kind of make them their own story, which it really did. So as far as that goes, yeah, I mean, if I get a chance to finish it, then I will finish it. And I'm for what I saw, I would give it a 6 out of 10 if I really had to rate it.
I definitely wasn't expecting much with this movie, but I did like it. And as far as was the movie scary, I don't know. It did have like one jump scare that actually kind of got me. And there was like a definite tension like throughout the movie. You kept like kind of waiting for the next thing to happen. And I thought the story was interesting. I wanted to see where they were going with it. Even though it was a little predictable at the end. I mean, it seems like with any found footage movie, you kind of know how it's going to end already because, just the nature of so somebody's found this film, and so obviously the people that made the film aren't around to tell the story anymore. So you kind of like, without giving too much away, you kind of know where it's going, because that's just the nature of the found footage movies. But I thought the acting was really good, especially, John Grise and all of them. I thought the acting was well done. I felt like the actors worked well together, and I thought the cinematography was really good. Like, for a found footage movie, this was almost too polished, because they definitely edited it, together, all the scenes together, and there was like fade-ins and fade-outs between the scenes, and that almost like took me out. Like, okay, this is supposed to be found footage that some people just happened to get. Well, and I guess you could say, well, whoever found the footage edited it together. I guess you could use that reasoning. But the cinematography was pretty good. The pacing was well done. Definitely kept the tension going throughout the movie. It didn't really let up. But one of the downfalls of the movie that I didn't really like was there is a score to it. So that kind of takes you out of the movie a little bit. And anytime something weird happens, there's like static or whatever on the video. So that kind of clues you in, okay, something's going to happen. So I didn't really like that about it. But the special effects overall did look pretty good. I think towards the end, you could tell it was definitely CGI. And so I kind of took I took a point off for that. But even though like normally a found footage movie does not have a score, this did. And, it sounded fine, but I don't know, like, I guess with the found footage, you don't normally expect there to be a score. But, this was a interesting movie. It's nothing, it's just with any horror movie that doesn't really have like a serious like message to it or anything, but I thought it was the right length of time. But I think, as a complete story, I think it came together pretty good. I don't know. I think it was too polished to be the found footage style of filming or what, that this is. But yeah, I'm right there with you. I'm giving this a 6 out of 10. It's on Amazon. You can rent the like standard definition for $2.99. It's not expensive. So I would say it's probably worth a watch. Especially if you like John Grise, or, if you just like found footage, if you like, the topic of the Skinwalker Ranch, definitely give it a chance. I have a list here of other movies that were filmed in Utah. I thought I would just kind of go through that. And so you got Carnival of Souls from 1962. That was filmed in Utah. And The Car from 1977. Damnation Alley from 1977. Don't Go in the Woods from 1981. A movie called The Boogans from 1981, which is kind of a pretty cool creature feature. Cujo was actually partly filmed in Utah. Silent Night, Deadly Night in 1984 was filmed in Utah. Warning Sign from 1984. Nightmare at Noon in 1987. Sundown, the Vampire in Retreat from 1988. The Terror Within from 1988. Warlock from 1991. Oh, and I almost forgot, Troll 2 was filmed in Utah, and the movie Species was filmed in Utah as well. So it has some interesting movies that were filmed in the state of Utah, so I think that's kind of cool.
So, have you ever heard about the killer hobbits in Utah?
I think I ran across that story, but I didn't really look too much into it. What did you find out?
I really didn't read too much into it, but I kind of wish they'd make like a B. It could be a B horror movie for all I care, but I wish they'd make a Killer Hobbits movie. It'd be so awesome.
Yeah, I'd watch it.
I think it'd be one of the only B movies I could get into.
Yeah, that definitely sounds like a Sci-Fi Channel thing,
Yeah, and I could see Tara Reid playing the dumb blonde in it, don't you think?
Oh yeah, definitely.
We could have the Sharknado cast.
Oh yeah, that would be perfect for them. I mean, yeah, Tara Reid's kind of got the market cornered on being the dumb blonde, I think.
Pretty much, yeah.
But yeah, so yeah, definitely. I'd be up for watching a Killer Hobbit movie. Maybe you could be like Rabid Hobbits or something like that. I don't know.
Oh my God, rabid hobbits. I could see Frodo Baggins running through the Shire, foaming at the mouth.
Yeah, they would. It could be like Hobbit werewolves or something like that.
Okay, that'd be awesome. Their big hairy feet turn to big paws with claws.
If somebody from Sci-Fi heard that idea, I'm sure they would probably actually do that. Because I think they're just about out of ideas at this point.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, if anybody out there is from Sci-Fi, yeah, reach out and contact us, because I think I got a good idea for a script here.
We want to thank you guys for tuning in to our episode on Utah, continuing our road trip of horror here. And we just want to remind everybody, if you want to share your stories for your state, go ahead and send us an email at blackcatpodcast@gmail.com. Or if you want to jump on and be a guest with us, that's cool too. We're more than happy to have you guys on and to talk about your state. So the next state that we're going to be talking about is Idaho. So we definitely want to get people on here that actually live in these states to talk about their stories. And because I think that it kind of lends a little bit of authenticity to the stories. You know, you're the people that have actually grown up with these stories. We're just doing research and kind of reading off what's on the web. But you guys have actually grown up with these stories. You actually know which ones are, total bunk or which ones are actually have some validity to them. And you might actually have some interesting history to add to them too. Definitely want to hear from you guys. You can check out our website at www.blackcatshadow.com, where you can see all of our podcast episodes. You can listen to them for free. We're also on iTunes, Stitcher. You can see all the links there for us. On social media, you can find us on Twitter. It's at Black Cat Podcast. And also we're on Facebook, and we're also on Horror Amino as well. Let's see, Dakota, I think you've got an alternate contact where people can get a hold of you. What's that?
Yeah, if you guys want to reach out and talk to me, got my email here for you. That's dakshadowbane@gmail.com. You can just email me, tell me some creepy stories from your state. I might read them on the podcast, and if you actually want to tell them yourself, you can tell them yourself, hopefully. If you guys want to reach out to me on Horror Amino, I'm trying to get my social media game back to the way it was. Now that I'm working some regular hours again, I can try to kind of do that. You just look for me on Horror Amino, Rainstorm01. Rainstorm is RAIYN. Yeah, you just look for me there and see some of my. You can actually read my excerpt from Jesse's Dreams. I'm actually working on it right now. I actually just talked to Dave just a couple days ago. He was asking me how I'm doing about all my writing.
Oh, cool! Yeah, Dave. Yeah, if anybody that doesn't know, it's Dave Dubose. He's been on a couple episodes here with us, and he's actually going to be on our episode in Texas when we make a stop in Texas. He's going to jump on here and join us and help us tell some of the creepy stories from Texas. So that would be fun.
Yeah, I can't wait. I love talking to Dave. He's such a cool guy.
Yeah, he is. And he's actually a regular co-host on another podcast. It's the B-Movie Bros podcast. And you can look them up. I know they have like a SoundCloud page where they upload their episodes. And so yeah, definitely look them up because he's a regular on there. And they also have episodes where he tells his stories that he writes too. So I need to check those out myself. But yeah, check it out. It's B-Movie Bros. And it has Dave Dubose on there, and he's, like I say, he's going to be on here on occasion. So yeah, check that out.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure he would like our story about our killer hobbits movie idea.
Yeah, I'm sure he would laugh at that.
Yeah, we might be able to pitch it to both Dee and Dave. I'm sure they would really like to have a good laugh and maybe make a nice little short film.
Oh yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah.
So that'll do it for episode 23. And so stay tuned for episode 24 where we jump into the stories from Idaho. So remember, guys, to take a closer look at the world around you, and you may just find that it is stranger and more mysterious than you thought, especially in the Black Cat's shadow.